Okay, so I have my drawing, my value rendering. So this is the same as the um, thumbnail that I did. And you can see that the value rendering is the exact same size as the canvas. So I just traced the corners of the canvas so I would know how big to make the value drawing. And I use charcoal, but you can use whatever you want as far as a media that has value. So you could use graphite pencil, you could use ink wash, you could use ballpoint pen, whatever you want that you can do value effectively that you're comfortable with. This, though, is a lot like what the technique we're going to do is like. So in this drawing, the darkest areas are the thickest areas of material and the lightest areas are the thinnest, right? So it's going to be the same thing with the painting, okay? So now I'm going to take this down. Okay, so I've got, this is a filbert I'm using actually. It's a 2 filbert, and I'm not drawing anything on the canvas. Okay, I did the drawing already, so I'm not going to draw with drawing material on the canvas. I can't stress that enough. Do not do that. If you feel like you have to do it, then vine charcoal would be the thing to do, but I would prefer you don't do it, and I'll show you why. As you put this down, so you can see I have this thinned out, medium thinned out. I'm getting my teapot where it needs to be. Let's say I made a mistake and I need to get rid of that. You can just wipe that off with a rag. And that's not going to affect the overall painting. If I drew a line with graphite, that stays. So if you make a mistake with the graphite, that mistake is going to stay on there. So I've got this thinned out with a medium, relatively thin, using a ratio of, for this one is 4 parts Gamsol to 1 part linseed oil. See that? Look at that. So this technique is a lot like I said, like the charcoal reverse, but also like the like watercolor. I'm laying out everything that needs to be laid out. So good little tricks to get like the angle accurate for perspective. You can take your brush and you hold it like this up against the corner, and then you can see what that angle looks like against the plumb line. So that's a drawing trick. Okay, that's something that you should have picked up already. Drawing one, but you know. The other thing I want to point out is that you can see as I put this down, because this is a fairly porous surface meant to absorb, you can see that the paint is spreading a little bit. It absorbs into the canvas surface and bleeds, okay, like a watercolor does. And that will stop happening as you continue to work, okay? But it happens at the first level of the painting, and it's not a big deal. It's nothing to worry about. So from the number 2, I'm going now to a fatter brush. I think it's a 4 bristle. And I'm spreading this paint out relatively thin. That's the thing where students have trouble with this. The reason they're having trouble is because they're going on too thick. By thick, I mean the actual paint surface. So something like this, I can spread out. So those initial lines that I drew are not getting picked up. So you can hear it's like I'm scrubbing this into the surface. This is what's known as the solvent layer. It could actually be all solvent. And no medium and no oil at all. And that works. This part is relatively dark. Because this edge here is defined by a light, so when I have that dark back there, you can really kind of see the bleeding of the paint right now. Again, not a big deal. I'm not. This is another reason why the drawing part doesn't want to have that paint. Things are going to move around. It's a big deal. And I'm constantly wiping my brush. Now, this part here where it's darker than it needs to be. It needs to be lighter than that. So what we're going to do is we're going to wipe away. This is like, again, like the sharper reverse drawing we talked about before. Like that. So remember, the charcoal reverse drawing from your drawing 1 class, what you had to do is you had to use your eraser to draw with your eraser. But we're going to use our rag, or we're going to use the brush dipped in medium or solvent. This is basically blocking in value right now. You want to pick this up. So I have my medium cup filled up to the brim. Okay, so it's filled to the brim. Whenever I'm dipping my brush into the medium cup, I'm making sure that my brush doesn't touch the bottom. And if I do that, my medium will stay clean. I don't have to throw it away. And I'll be using eventually a brush that's going to be for light and a brush that's going to be for dark. So let's just take some of this off. So we're going to spread around some of the, not that much, medium. And then we're going to wipe away to get that light. This is just a brush right now with nothing on it, just medium. To get that light rim. So right now what we're doing is blocking in. So that's the basic tones, basic light and shadow. A little bit of reflected light down here. Whenever it's not taking off enough, you just wipe it with your rag. And we do have here shadow, cast shadow. you'll start to see that spreading there. You can use the rag to do both, to wipe your brush and to wipe the canvas. I like to have the paper towel to clean the brush on, and then have the rag just for the canvas. Sometimes I forget. If your drawing varies, your painting varies a little bit from your thumbnail, it's not a big deal. If it varies a lot, that's a big deal. So try to keep it close to what you had. Because I approved your composition, I didn't approve a new composition. So you want to make sure you're doing what I approved. If you're ever not clear why I'm approving one thing over something else, I try to remember to give you, to tell you why I'm saying that. But if I forget, feel free to ask. Okay, so now you can see a kind of blobby version of the drawing. Then we're going to refine this. We're going to refine this by using the sable brushes. So this is only to get the initial, and just like, because this is so much like watercolor, watercolor you're using sable brushes, right? Still, you can see parts where the paint might be too thick. Just drew on my brush. That is, like I said, it's going to eventually absorb, and as you work, you'll see that kind of happen. That goes away. When we do later, we're going to do another still life that's going to involve underpainting, and we're going to prepare the canvas in advance so that it doesn't do that. But you don't need to worry about that now. And the thing about this, starting off with this particular technique, is that it's kind of tough, because you're kind of coming to terms with like the fluidity of the paint, the possibilities of the paint and the blending, and you're looking at value differences and things like that. But it's really a hard technique, especially with the very first thing. But as you can see, it's very forgiving because you can make adjustments. Okay, now I'm going to start to figure out some of the detail on top of this, some of the value differences. This needs to go a lot darker. So it's good to have 2 sable brushes. These are 6 sable rounds. And have one that's going to be for dark and one that's going to be for light. Okay, and if they're different, like these two are, they look different, the barrel is different, it's easier to remember which one is which. now, up in here, I didn't get that dark inside. Okay, you can see I just moved that around, and doing that, picked up some of the paint that was in the negative space. It actually works for a shadow there, so we'll probably go back to that. Here I have core shadow. You can see the strokes that I'm putting down are form following. And say follow the form. So in my drawing one class, some of you had me for drawing one, but even if you didn't, you probably had someone who told you this, that when you're applying value for, say, hatching, right, you have to use form following strokes. And the reason you're using form following strokes is because it helps give volume more to the object. So now I'm going to show you something really magic. I've got a sable, flat sable. It's not actually a sable. This is, what is this? I think it's badger hair, okay? But it's soft like sable. It's a little stiffer than a sable brush would be, but it's basically soft. So if you had a sable brush or a synthetic brush, it's like a sable. That would be what this is for. And this is going to blend. So this is going to soften out those brush strokes. It's going to soften out transitions. There's nothing on this, no medium, no nothing. It's all just a dry brush. So you can see how it's spreading out that paint layer thinner. Even in the negative space, you can use it. There's a reflected light right here from the spout. So now, this is just medium now. Cutting back into that so I can get that light in there. And the thing also that you learned beginning drawing is reflected light's never going to be as light as the light side. So let's say we make it too light. We could just make it a little bit darker by using that blending brush. This is going to have a little bit of value on it. These two. Making sure that I'm not getting, what I don't want to have is puddles of paint. So you don't want to let that paint puddle. So flooding this with medium is not going to be the thing to do. You want to make sure that you're spreading this out. Even though it's starting to look like it's dry, it isn't dry at all. Restating the negative space in there. I'm getting more careful. So it'll slowly come into focus, much like the charcoal reverse drawing when you're doing that. In a lot of ways, I said this is like watercolor. It's more forgiving than the watercolor. Because with watercolor, you really have to plan in advance. If you can handle watercolor, then this will be a snap for you. As you reflected light, it is too light. So you need to make that a little dirtier. I want to show you now, we're going to make a really bright highlight in there. Look at that! Oh my god, look at that! Isn't that exciting? Look how bright that is. Okay, so you can see that and we're going to need another one over here. I wouldn't be doing these now probably, but just so you can see while I'm talking what that looks like. I need to bring this spout. I always make this spout over too far. I should just position it a different way. Trauma of not having lines underneath is really something that students have to come to terms with. It's something they do not want to let go of. So the trick for you is that if you do it, if you put lines down first with the drawing medium, is to hide it from me. Down in. The shadow side on that spout is going to need to be punched up. Obviously, this is going to be too dark. On the pages section in Canvas, there's a couple of illustrations, they're paintings, but they're serving as an illustration on the pages section by Mark Tansey. So you can check those out. And the reason you'd want to check those out is because those paintings, which are a lot more complicated than a teapot, were rendered in this exact same technique. Okay? He does draw on them first, because they're very detailed. When I'm blending, I'm using form following. I use form following this direction, coming around, or I can use form following coming down. So you look at those paintings, you'll see, oh, you can get a full range of values with them. There's a conceptual reason why he did that, because this is an underpainting technique, right? So he was trying to, I think, take away some of the grandeur of history painting, sort of deconstructing history painting, showing the bones of it. If you want to sound really smart in your art class, then whenever you're talking about analyzing something, use the word deconstructing. Or the idea behind a piece of art, the concept. Or the ideas behind a particular movement of art. Refer to those as theory. Everybody will think you're a genius. Shadow. This will become more detailed. I am going to get all the little ridges and things like that on the teapot. You'll see me doing that, but you're going to see me doing it faster because as enthralling as my narrative is as I'm doing this, it does tend to slow me down a little bit. So you'll want to see the painting to its completion. And the other thing I said before was that the the painting class, you don't get to sit and watch me do the whole thing when you're in the studio because you have to be painting. One thing that's important about this is this painting needs to be done in one go. Okay, so you're gonna have to get it done today. And after you get it going, it shouldn't take you longer than, say, 2 hours to 3 hours to do, which is why I have you doing the value drawing, on the same day. The value drawing that you saw me show you at the beginning, don't spend forever on that, no more than 2 hours on that. Of course, you can spend as long as you want if you're at home. But for this painting, it's got to be completed because there's got to be drying time. When we do the next layer, because we're going to put a layer on top of this, it's going to be, this has got to be completely dry, okay? Completely dry. Not even a little bit wet. Okay, so this, because we're putting it on so thin, this should be, I think, mine will be dry tomorrow. But, a couple days for sure. A week, for certain, it'll be dry, all right? So you need to make sure of that. Other things I want to point out that are things that are going to be flaws if you don't do it properly. Pay attention to where the cast shadow is coming from. It's not coming from there. It's coming from the widest point out on the object because the light's over there. Pay attention to things like like right now, this looks like an outline, okay? It's not going to be an outline. It's going to get blended away, right? Or that whole space is going to get darker, but you don't want to have outlines around things, okay? What I'm going to be grading this on, and this is a grade that isn't going to be, it's not going to kill you if you blow this. Obviously, we don't want to blow it, but it'll be graded at 20 points, and the next layer will be 20 points as well. So we're going to start off with something that's relatively, low risk as far as grade goes. Okay, so we're going to speed this up, and you're going to get to see the whole thing finished. Okay, it's all pretty far along now, but it'll be really dialed in, really focused.